The famous singer smiled as the crowd laughed. This wasn't a concert, this was a setup. He pointed straight at a black boy hiding in the back row and said, "Come here, let's see if you people really know music." The room froze. The boy's hands trembled as cameras zoomed in, already hungry for his failure. This wasn't about talent. It was about humiliation, broadcast live. But then the boy opened his mouth. And in that single moment the mockery died, the singer went pale, and an entire auditorium realized something terrifying. They had underestimated the wrong person. Before you hear what that boy sang, before you see how the laughter disappeared from every face in that room, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because stories like this aren't just about music. They're about dignity, about what happens when someone is judged before they're heard. If you've ever been underestimated, silenced, or made to feel small, this story is for you. Now listen carefully, because what happens next changed everything. The boy's name was Jordan Miles. He was 15 years old, tall but painfully thin, the kind of kid teachers often forgot to call on and classmates rarely bothered to remember. Jordan lived with his mother and younger sister in a small apartment above an old grocery store. The paint peeled from the walls, the heater barely worked in winter, and silence often felt heavier than noise. Jordan didn't talk much at school, not because he had nothing to say, but because experience had taught him that speaking up only made things worse. His voice, however, was a different story. At night, when his sister fell asleep and his mother worked late shifts, Jordan sang softly into the dim light of their kitchen. No stage, no audience, just emotion. Music was the only place where he felt safe enough to be honest. When the school announced a surprise assembly featuring Calvin Rhodes, a world-famous singer with multiple awards and millions of fans, excitement spread fast. Teachers praised it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Students whispered about selfies and viral moments. Jordan expected nothing. He sat in the back row, hoodie pulled low, hoping to disappear into the crowd. But Calvin Rhodes wasn't there just to inspire. He had a reputation, one few dared to talk about openly. At certain schools, especially ones like this, he liked to remind people who belonged on stage and who didn't. He called it real talk. Others called it something else. And that morning, as Calvin scanned the audience, his eyes landed on Jordan, quiet, still, unassuming, an easy target. Calvin Rhodes paced the stage confidently, microphone in hand, soaking in the applause like oxygen. He spoke about success, talent, and how the world doesn't owe anyone anything. His words sounded motivational, but something underneath them felt cold. Everyone thinks they have talent, he said, smiling. But very few actually do. A few students laughed. Calvin looked out again, scanning faces. Then he pointed. "You, in the back, stand up." Jordan's stomach dropped. Dozens of heads turned. Whispers filled the air. Slowly, Jordan stood, heart pounding. "What's your name?" Calvin asked Jordan. He replied softly. Calvin nodded. "Jordan, you sing." Jordan hesitated. "Sometimes." The smile on Calvin's face widened. "Perfect, come up here. Let's hear what you've got." A teacher stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable, but Calvin waved her away. "Relax. This is about confidence." Jordan walked toward the stage, every step feeling heavier than the last. Laughter followed him, not loud but sharp enough to cut. Calvin handed him a microphone. "No music," he said. "Let's see raw talent." Then, leaning closer, just loud enough for the front rows to hear, Calvin added, "Don't worry, not everyone's built for this." The words hit harder than the laughter. Jordan's hands trembled. He thought about sitting down, about handing the mic back, about disappearing forever. He could already imagine the comments, the jokes, the looks at school tomorrow. Then he thought of his mother humming while cooking, of his sister smiling when he sang her to sleep, of every moment he had stayed silent just to survive. Jordan closed his eyes. He took one slow breath. And he sang. At first his voice was quiet, soft enough that a few people exchanged confused looks. Calvin smirked, clearly unimpressed, but then the tone changed. Jordan's voice grew stronger, richer, filled with something unexpected: control. Emotion, truth. The whispers stopped. Phones lowered. Teachers leaned forward. The song rose gently, note by note, until the room felt different. He wasn't singing to impress. He was singing to release everything he'd held inside. And then he climbed higher. Jordan reached a note that made the air feel thin, A high note. Clean, steady. Calvin's smile faded. Jordan didn't stop. He pushed further in, to a range most trained singers avoided. A note Calvin Rhodes himself had struggled to hit live, something he carefully edited out of performances. Jordan held it. 5 seconds passed. 10. The sound didn't break. People gasped. Calvin took a step back, eyes wide, his microphone hanging uselessly at his side. Jordan's voice filled the auditorium, powerful and unshaken. It wasn't just impressive. It was undeniable. When he finally released the note, the silence afterward felt unreal. Then one person stood, then another. Then the entire room rose to its feet. Applause thundered, cheers echoed. Some teachers wiped away tears. Students stared in disbelief. Jordan stood still, breathing hard, unsure what had just happened. Calvin tried to speak, but no words came out. The boy he had tried to mock had just done what he couldn't. Jordan handed the microphone back without a word and walked off the stage. This time, the crowd parted for him. The video exploded online that same day. Millions watched it. Not just for the singing, but for the moment power shifted. For the reminder that dignity doesn't ask permission. Calvin Rhodes released a statement days later, praising Jordan's unexpected talent. But people remembered the smirk. The setup, the silence when he was outmatched. Jordan didn't chase fame, but opportunities found him. Music teachers reached out. Scholarships followed. For the first time, people listened. Not because he demanded it, but because he had earned it. At school, Jordan walked differently, not louder, just stronger. And at home, late at night, he still sang. But now, he didn't hide. Because that day taught everyone watching a truth the world keeps forgetting. Never confuse silence with weakness. Never mistake humility for lack of talent. And never assume someone's limits because sometimes the quietest voice carries the strongest note.